What up, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing one of my favorite videos, which is we're going to talk about the books that I read in the month of August. And I have a couple books in there that were very hyped, so we're going to talk about whether or not they were worth the hype. I'm also going to be discussing the books that I plan to read in September. Now, if you're new here, welcome. First of all, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for clicking on this video. Generally, I do haul videos, okay? I usually go to Costco. Where else do I shop, guys? Target, Publix, and then I just share some like random mail hauls every once in a while. But basically I spend money and you get to judge and decide whether or not the money was justified. You know what I'm saying? It's perfect for everyone. If you love book content and that's the reason you're here today, my Instagram, I actually set up an Instagram purely for book content. It's called @KateChapters. I'll put it up on the screen and it'll be linked down below. On that Instagram, I share the books that I'm reading as I'm reading them. I also dive into my archive of reviews on GoodReads and share my book reviews from there. That way you guys, when you're at like say the library or Barnes & Noble or shopping on Amazon or there's a deal or something like that, there's an easy place to reference for all of the books that I've read. And I even keep a highlight of my 5-star reads. So you know those are the ones that Kate enjoyed the most, okay? Before I start, I always like to just explain that if you're new to these videos with me, I do not give any spoilers, but I do give a summary of the book that I read. So I'll summarize it in like 3 to 4 sentences if I can get myself to stop talking, because I am Portuguese, so I talk quite a bit. And then I usually just share my thoughts. And I also give it a rating. I don't have any fancy scale that I rate it on. I just go by directly after finishing the book. How did that book make me feel? How did I walk away feeling? I've rambled enough about all of the housekeeping things. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video and let's talk about the books that I read in the month of August. So in the month of August, my first book was actually a thriller and it was called The Maid's Diary by Loreth Ann White. And I know I just promised you that we're going to get into this video, but hey friends, Editing Kate here. I watched this back and I think that I didn't explain the first reads program very well. So if it's choppy, that's why I'm explaining why I'm popping in, whatever. What I'm talking about here is there's a program from Amazon and it's called First Reads. And once per month, you can go onto the Amazon website, amazon.com/firstreads, which I'll put on the screen and it'll be linked down below. This is not an affiliate link of mine whatsoever. I'm just letting people know about it because apparently people didn't know about this. You can go on and they list like 5 or 6 books and they're all a variety of genres, a variety of authors. So if you have Amazon Prime, you can pick out one book for free. It has to be, I believe, a consumer Prime account because one of my friends has Amazon Business Prime and it didn't work for her. If you're just a regular Amazon consumer, you can still download the book at a discount. So it's usually only like $1.99 versus whatever the Kindle price is, which as you know with Kindle, that could range from $5.99 up to like $14.99, I think. So anyways, I just wanted to let people know about it because once per month, you can go on and collect a free book for your Kindle. It can be delivered to your Kindle app. So even if you don't have an actual Kindle device, you could read it on any tablet, on your phone, anything that has the Kindle app capability. So just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's a great program that, as I told a couple friends about it, they had no idea. Okay, back to the video. But anyways, this book was one of my free books from a couple months ago, I want to say. This was one of the books that they had offered for free on there. So for this book, I actually give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This book follows Kit, and she is a maid, and she has a snooping problem. And her best friend keeps warning her that if you don't stop snooping around these rich people's houses, one of these times you're going to get yourself in trouble. And he ends up being right. This book was really, really good. The only reason why it wasn't a full 5-star, and this is kind of a flaw with most thrillers, is that they always have so many characters. And when you have so many characters, I get it because it takes you off the scent of the trail of, you know, whodunit. But in this case, I found myself spending like the first 20% of the book just trying to figure out who is who knows who, what's going on. You know what I'm saying? So that's the only downside. But once you get into it, once you sink into it and you've understood who everybody is, this book picks up. I didn't want to put it down. It was not heart racing where like it made me like physically concerned or anything, but it just was one of those intoxicating type reads. You know what I mean? So if you're looking for a really good psychological thriller, and it's a little bit of, I don't like the term guilty pleasure, but you get what I'm saying. It's just one of those like just books that it's like a kind of like rich people drama and stuff like that. It just ends up being so good. So definitely read it. Okay, the next book that I read was from one of my favorite authors, Lucy Score, and it's called Pretend You're Mine. And this one I gave a 4 out of 5 for stars and 1.5 out of 5 for spice. This one follows Harper and Luke, and Harper is trying to escape her life again. She's trying to reinvent herself, and she stumbles into the town of Benevolence, and she ends up getting into a little bit of a scuffle, and she meets this guy named Luke. Well, it turns out that he needs her to pretend to be his girlfriend to get his family off his back. This one, like I said, I gave a 4.5. Now, I will say this. If you start reading this book, Lucy Score's books are very, very long. It's a very, very long book. And I'm not going to lie to you when I say like the first maybe quarter of this book, I was really like, was this written by Lucy Score? Because it took me a little while to get into it. But once I got into it, the emotions that run through you while reading this book, so good. It is a little bit of pulling at the heartstrings. There's a lot of angst. It's definitely a slow burn. The beginning of the book, my problem was that the character Harper, she has a lot of like that pick me, choose me type energy, and it was just bugging me. It was just irritating me. But as the book goes on, I feel like it ends up being a good thing because you really feel her development. So that's what I enjoyed about it. And that one I believe is also free on Kindle Unlimited. Okay, so the next book that I want to talk about is called Behind the Net, and it's by Stephanie Archer. This book I gave a 5-star rating. Okay, it's a spicy romance with a 5-star rating. My ratings are relative to the genre. So like I don't, a spicy romance is not going to be at the same level of compelling as say a historical fiction. So 5-star rating, 1.5 out of 5 for the spicy factor. If you have seen the viral book Icebreaker that goes around like TikTok and you also didn't enjoy it because I didn't enjoy it as everybody else did, maybe try this book because I feel like this is what that book was trying to accomplish. This was so good. It's like a hockey romance. So if you're into sports romances, or even if you're not, because I used to not be into sports romances, but this one was done really well. So this one follows Pippa, who was actually just recently dumped by her longtime boyfriend in the middle of a music tour that she went around and she was basically his songwriter and his muse for his music. He breaks up with her and kicks her off the tour, and she has to go back home and figure out what she's going to do. She ends up getting a job as a personal assistant to a professional hockey player. That professional hockey player happens to be a guy that she went to high school with and had a crush on. I loved this book. It was done so well. There was slight miscommunications, but they were like understandable miscommunications. There was a lot of emotions. There was a lot of backstory. There was a lot of plot. I loved the main characters. I loved how they were together. I just loved this book. So I would definitely recommend this one. I think this is another one that's free on Kindle Unlimited. So check that out if you have it. This next book, you guys, okay? This next book is called A Love Letter to Whiskey by Candy Steiner. This one is also a spicy romance. This one was a 5-star rating. Spice, though, was only a 1. Okay, so a little lower on the spice, even though it's in that spicy romance category. This follows B and Jamie. I think that's his name. Yes, B and Jamie. They have been the best of friends since high school, but circumstances in their lives have always kept them from exploring their true feelings for each other. But they always find themselves kind of dancing around each other, and it ends up getting them into some trouble. This book, I was literally in a chokehold reading this book. This book took over my soul to be as dramatic as possible, okay? I'm a dramatic person, and I need you to know my soul was being sucked away by this book. I am the type of person that I don't like miscommunication and I don't like angst generally, but apparently I need it to be turned up to like ghost pepper level angst in order for me to enjoy it. And can't even use the word enjoy. But you know what I'm saying, okay? The angst on this is off the charts. It was ridiculous. I would definitely look up trigger warnings if you have any sensitivities whatsoever, because there are some heavier topics in this book. But the way I wanted to just throw my Kindle across the room, but also I didn't want to stop reading, it was a wild ride. I was literally like, if I was doing dishes, I had my Kindle propped up so I could read while I was doing dishes. Like, that was this type of book. I could not put it down. And that is another one that is available on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, there you go. Okay, this next book I read was kind of fun because this one I got during Amazon's, I don't know if Amazon calls it this or if bloggers just call it this, but it's like the Stuff Your Kindle Day. And basically, bloggers put together, it's mostly romances on this particular day, where there's a bunch of books that you can download absolutely free for like either a 24 or 48 hour period on Amazon. So this was one of the books that I actually got during that thing. So keep an eye out. This book was called Talore, a Lord by Caro Kincaid. Not Carol, but Caro. This one I gave a 4-star, and it was like a 0.5 on the spice factor. So it wasn't squeaky clean, but it also wasn't spicy. Stella is here right now, beneath me. So anyways, this follows Augusta, and it's like a historical romance. So basically her parents' finances are a total mess. So she is being used as a bargaining chip in order for them to be able to have their grandfather finance all 3 of the kids during season, which is like, I don't know, if you've watched like Bridgerton or anything, basically like when the girls hit a certain age, they would go out and try and be matched with their future husband. So their grandfather has agreed to cover the costs that are associated with this as long as she finds a husband by a certain point. She has her eyes set on one dude, but her grandfather has his eyes set on that dude's best friend. So that causes a few issues. When you see the cover on the screen, you're probably going to be like, Kate, what the heck? It looks like one of those books you'd find at like Dollar Tree, like in this section, like all the way at the bottom. Don't judge a book by its cover on this one. It was so good. It was very dynamic. The characters had so many layers to it. It was very dramatic. It's, if you like Downton Abbey or Bridgerton or any of those shows, pick it up. And it was true to the time period, but it was also calling out the time period for how the double standards were for men and women back then. So I loved it. It didn't feel preachy, but it just felt like real. It felt genuine. The other thing is the mother in this book is phenomenal. She's like warm, but she's also conniving. So it was like, I loved how those two characteristics of hers played against each other, and I like want an entire book of just her because I just loved her. Another one that I got during that Stuff Your Kindle Day was called Guarded by the Cowboy, and this was by M. Petrova. I don't want to dog a book, so I'm going to kind of keep this brief. I just, like, my head kind of hurt after reading it. It was very chaotic. It was very fast-paced. It just felt kind of cheesy. I don't know. It just, like I said, it wasn't for me. If you like the faster-paced, like, suspense-type spicy romances, this could be for you, but it just wasn't for me. Okay, this next one was called Maestro by Auden Dar, and this is another one, do not judge the book by its cover, because this cover did not do this book justice. As I was reading A Love Letter to Whiskey, one of my friends was reading this book, and she told me about it, and it's similar. When I say it's similar, the plots are not similar, but the level of angst on this one, and it was one of those ones where the two could never get their timing down right. So anyways, let's just get into it. I gave this one also a 5-star. For spice factor, I only gave it a 1. This follows Aurelia and Chad, and they meet when they're very young. I think they were like 13 years old, and they were trying to get into this exclusive music program or musical high school or something like that. They're both musicians. They end up being best friends. And then it was kind of the same thing where they danced around each other even though they were always in love with each other. And then a bunch of circumstances in life just kind of keep them apart. This book destroyed me. Like, I'm not even kidding. It was the same level of Love Letter to Whiskey where I did not want to put it down. I actually think on this one I stayed up until like 3 o'clock in the morning just sobbing and reading this book. It's definitely high on the angst factor. The heroine in this book is just probably one of the most selfless characters I've ever read, and her strength and perseverance to get through the things that she gets through was just absolutely astounding. This one is also available, at least right now, on Kindle Unlimited. I then went on to Finally Mine by Lucy Score, which is the second book to Pretend You're Mine that we talked about earlier in the Benevolent series. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Spice factor was a 1 out of 5. This one follows Gloria, who just got out of a very tough relationship, so definitely look up trigger warnings for this one. And she is trying to reinvent herself and figure out who she is after getting out of that toxic situation. Aldo has been her friend since high school and has always had a crush on her. He wants to give her time to heal and figure out who she is as well. And the timing works out pretty good because he's about to get deployed. So they decide that once he gets back from deployment, they're going to go out on a first date. This one, the only reason why I didn't rate it higher is because it runs simultaneous to the first book, and literally chapters are copied from the first book word to word. Had I read this book maybe 2 years apart, I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more, that like every chapter was the same. But I just couldn't in good conscience like rate this higher because it's literally copy and pasted. So overall, the story was really good though. So if you wanted to read this standalone, maybe that wouldn't bug you as much. Or if it's been a while since you read the other one. I did also absolutely love Aldo and the way that he wanted her to make sure she took time to heal. And he was very adamant about that. He was very slow about how he approached her, but he wanted her to feel that he loved her and that he valued her and cherished her, and I just love how that was handled. Okay, the next book that I read is called The Virgin Romance Novelist by Megan Quinn. I'm gonna let you know right now that I am a massive Megan Quinn fan, so I'm shocked, but this book for me was a 2 out of 5 star. Spice factor was 1 out of 5. This story follows Rosie, and she's obsessed with the idea of writing a romance novel. The problem is that she's a virgin, and she doesn't have enough experience with even PG romance in order to be able to pull off writing a romance book. So her roommates decide, in order to help her achieve her goal, they are going to get her out on the market and try to get her experience, if you know what I'm saying. This book, the reason why I did not like it is because the roommates are so aggressive with this girl and the goal. I just felt like they were like cringy, and I basically had secondhand embarrassment the entire time. And I know that I'm probably in the minority on that, so don't not read it because of me, because a lot of people love that book, but for some reason we did not line up. Okay, the next book was The Wedding Ringer by Kerry Rhea. And first of all, can we just talk about the cover on this one? I mean, it's great. This looks like, you know, early 2000s rom-com. I loved the cover. This one was actually a library read for me. It's not on Kindle Unlimited, so if you're paying attention to that, you'd have to request it from your library or buy it. But this one I actually gave a 4.25 out of 5 star, and Spice Factor was a 1 out of 5. So this follows Willa, who actually used to be a very successful blogger, but she has her entire life changed when she walks in with her fiance and her best friend in bed together. So she has to move back in with her sister, and she starts a career working for her sister's event company as Princess Sparklebottom. She is out trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life, and she gets approached by this girl who offers her an opportunity that's a little bit unconventional and a little bit crazy, but Willa decides that she has no choice but to try and go for it. So she jumps at the opportunity. This book, if you're looking for like one of those like light palate cleanser rom-coms that are slightly cheesy but not overly cheesy and just are joy to read, this is the book for you. There's some LOL moments in this book. There's some great characters in this book. The romance really takes a back seat to this one. This is more about a friendship that's blossoming and about a woman reinventing herself. So I just loved how the romance kind of took a backseat in this one, but it was still evident. I loved the way they handled jerks in the book, because there's a couple jerks in the book. I loved this. I loved this book. Next up, I read Not My Kind of Hero by Pippa Grant. Pippa Grant is one of the authors that I recently discovered and I'm loving. So if you're looking for an author, if you're like a Megan Quinn, Lucy Score fan, definitely look up Pippa Grant, because I really, really enjoy her style of writing. This one I only gave a 3 out of 5. It's a spicy romance, and for spice I gave it a 1 out of 5. So Maisie is a newly single mom to a teenager, and their life is an absolute mess. Her ex-husband's a jerk, and her mom is having legal troubles. So she decides that her and her daughter need a fresh start. Her uncle left her a piece of property out in Wyoming, and this gives her the perfect opportunity for her and her daughter to have a fresh start. So she moves out there. Once she's out there, one of the tenants that lives on the property and her start to have some scuffles with one another because they can't agree on what's best for the ranch. So this book was not a total love for me. That's why it's a 3. I loved the premise of the book. I loved the way the heroine of the book was underestimated and she's starting to prove herself. The only reason I didn't love this book and didn't give more than a 3 is there's just a lot of back and forth on it. It's a very slow burn. But why I love Pippa Grant so much is because I feel like the internal dialogue that she does with her characters during their points of view in a book is just hilarious. She's really, really funny. So if you're looking for lighthearted, spicy romance that has some like really witty internal banter, like not even just like the dialogue side, but when she like talks about what the character is actively thinking about, it's really hilarious. So if that's the style you're looking for, definitely look up Pippa Grant. Okay, the next book that I read was Rescue Renovations by Jay Fields. This is also available on Kindle Unlimited. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5, and for Spice Factor I gave a 1 out of 5. This one's following Chase, who's working as an ER nurse, and this guy brings in his little girl, and he happens to be very grouchy and is not making her job very easy. Well, he ends up talking to her best friend, and it turns out that he is a contractor, so her best friend connivingly gets him to take on her house project. I hope that makes sense. Behind her back. So she shows up and finds out that he's the contractor that her best friend set up, and it turns out it's the jerky guy that she saw at work. You know what I'm saying? This was a really cute and witty book. I just felt like my problem with this book, and the only reason why I didn't rate it higher, there was a lot of errors in this book, like mistakes, misspellings, stuff like that. And I'm not usually like a big like stickler on stuff like that. This was like a debut novel, so I don't know what like the level of editing that goes into debut novels and stuff like that, but it was just enough to be distracting. So as soon as it started being distracting, it's not something I could like ignore. I think that there's a lot of potential. This was a series, so hopefully as I read on in the series, that'll be worked out. This book was Hunting Adeline by H.G. Carlton. The Haunting Adeline series, well, it's called the Cat and Mouse Duet, basically. Look up triggers. Do not enter this lightly. Okay, I am not kidding, especially the second book. The first book definitely has triggers. This second book, if you have any type of sensitivity, it's going to be very difficult to get through. There was sections of this book, I'm not being dramatic when I say like I was almost physically ill. So just be very cautious. I'm not even going to give a summary on this book because it would give spoilers from Haunting Adeline, and I would hate to give any spoilers on that book because you have to experience it if you want to, after reading the triggers, if you feel comfortable proceeding. And I'm not being dramatic, like you actually have to decide if your mental health can handle these two books. I'm not kidding. What I think that the author did so phenomenally in this book is that she took a subject that is very real and she made it real, so it wasn't what the readers wanted at all times because it was very real, but then she balances by kind of recovering a little bit for the readers. I thought that after reading the first one I could handle anything, but this book is seriously, seriously disturbing. If you can get through the first half of the book, the second half of the book, and this isn't, I'm trying not to do it with spoilers, but in the second half of the book they do introduce a new character who, well, she's in the first book, but I should say she reappears in the second book, and she provides a twisted sense of comedic relief. It's a very twisted comedic relief, but honestly in this book anything helps. So just to let you know, like the second half of the book is a little bit easier, but not by too much. This is one of the ones that it's very hyped, and I think it's worth the hype. Don't judge me because I gave it a 5-star, and Spice Factor on this, just to let you know, is a 5 out of 5. Okay, this next book I definitely needed to read after reading Hunting Adeline, and this was called In a Jam by Kate Canterbury. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 for stars and 1 out of 5 for spice. So this follows Shay, who has recently been left at the altar by her fiance and decides that she needs to shake up her life a little bit. She finds out that her beloved step-grandmother has actually left her tulip farm up in Friendship, Rhode Island. So she decides to take a year sabbatical from work and go up to the tulip farm to see if it's something she can, you know, dive into to help shake up her life, basically. This book was really what I needed after that last book. This is a very like typical, like if you're into like Hallmark romances type thing, this is definitely the book for you. The tulip farm setting in a small town was absolutely adorable. She shows up to the tulip farm and finds out that her best friend from high school is actually running the dairy farm down the road. And she thought they were like best friends in high school that just fell apart, but he seems to hate her and she can't figure out why. I just love this book. The only reason why it wasn't a full 5 out of me is because the reason for his hatred never really comes to anything. So I was kind of like, what happened there? I loved it. And I also loved how they talk about him like modernizing the dairy farm. And I just thought that was really fun and intriguing to read. Like, he was basically an entrepreneur out in a small town making the best of the situation he was in, and I just thought it was fascinating. And this one was also at this time available on Kindle Unlimited, so that's a plus. Okay, the next book that I read was actually a thriller, and this was Lisa Jewell, None of This Is True. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5. This one follows Josie, who's celebrating her 45th birthday, and her husband go out to dinner, and across the room she notices that another woman is also celebrating her 45th birthday. They run into each other in the bathroom, and she brings up the fact that they're birthday twins. She realizes that this woman in the bathroom with her is actually a podcaster, so she finds her and finds out they have another connection, so she approaches her and asks her if she'll make a podcast series about her life because she feels like her life is on the cusp of change. The podcaster is named Alex, or it might be Alix because it's spelled A-L-I-X. We're just going to go with Alex for the purposes of this video. Okay. Alex is intrigued by the situation, even though a bunch of alarms are going off in her head about this woman that has approached her. This book was really, really well done. Like, it was like the type where you didn't want to put it down. There's a slight predictability factor to it, so your heart's not pounding out of your chest. So because of the predictability, I had to kind of knock it down the half star. I thought the characters in this book were really, really done well, because the thing with thrillers is you can't love them too much, but you have to be invested in them. And I found myself rooting for both of the characters in this book, but never like enough where if one of them was the bad guy that it would like break my heart. You know what I mean? I feel like that must be so difficult for thriller writers to do. So I'm always impressed when they can pull it off, and they really pulled it off in this one. Okay, this next book was called Enemies Abroad by R.S. Gray. And this R.S. Gray is another author that I discovered this year. And she's another one that if you're like a Megan Quinn or Lucy Score fan, or if you like, you know, like a T.L. Swan or Vi Keeland, like those type of books, like the spicy romances, check out R.S. Gray. She is light on the spice, heavier on the plot, but I just feel like she does it in such a witty and sexy way that I just really enjoy her books. So this one was called Enemies Abroad by R.S. Gray. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I gave a 1 out of 5 on the spice. Just to let you know, as I'm giving these books a 1 out of 5, know that it's because I've recently read Haunting and Hunting Adeline. So it's like my spice factor meter is like, seriously, nothing can compete with that. So I feel like everything now is like a 1 or 1.5 when it would have been a 2 or 3 before. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've been adjusted. This follows 2 middle school teachers, Noah and Audrey, who cannot stand each other. Their teacher styles are very different. And they end up both volunteering to go to Rome with a bunch of 8th graders for, I think it's like 6 weeks. This book was really short and it was so sweet. I just loved it. I loved the setting in Italy. I felt like I got to go on vacation in this book. I loved the characters. I felt like the enemies to lover situation was actually legitimate, and I feel like that's something that not all authors pull off. This book is definitely a slow burn. I felt like the first half of the book is stronger than the second half of the book. By the second half of the book, I was almost wanting some type of a miscommunication or something to happen because it kind of just coasts along. But overall, I just thought it was a great book. And if you're looking for something where you feel like you can really escape, I think this is a really good book. And this is another one that's available on Kindle Unlimited. I cannot believe this, but I just realized that I read another book in the month of August that I didn't include in my monthly breakdown on my Instagram. So life is obviously over. Just kidding. I actually read 19 books in the month of August. Somehow I didn't put my review into GoodReads, but thankfully I saved it in the notes folder on my phone. So I have it for you guys. So the next book that we're going to talk about is The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This is a fantasy book, and I'm not a fantasy reader, but by the end of this video, my identity has changed. Okay, so just to let you know, we're on the path to becoming a fantasy reader. But before I started this book, I did not consider myself someone who enjoyed fantasy whatsoever. People told me to read A Court of Thorn and Roses. I didn't enjoy it. I'm going to continue on in the series. Calm down. I know people are very passionate about this series. I'm going to try because I've heard it gets better after the second book. So I'm going to give that a chance. But this book that I read is available on Kindle Unlimited, and I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and spice is a 1 out of 5 because there are spicy scenes later on in the book. This book follows Oriah, who is an adopted daughter of the Vampire King. And in order for her to get her full power that her adopted dad wants her to have, she needs to enter this tournament where it's basically like fight for the death type tournament, in order to get power provided to her from a goddess. This book is a very slow book. At least it was for me. Very, very slow. I could only do like a chapter or two of this book because it's very complicated. It's very gory because it's like vampires. It's a tournament. It's like kind of like a Hunger Games vibe meets a vampire situation. So I could only really take it like a chapter or two at a time. So it almost took me a full month to read this book, which is wild for me because I rip through books but I just felt like I knew I was going to love this book and I wanted to give it a fair shot at convincing me to be a fantasy reader, if that makes sense. I think that the author did a beautiful job. I think the writing was amazing. And then literally once you hit like the 70% mark, everything starts falling together and your mind is like completely blown. So I can't wait to read on in the series to see what happens because I think this is a 2-part book. All right, this next book was called Cabin Mate by Leah Brunner. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 for stars and 0 out of 5 for spice. So this one is completely squeaky clean, closed door romance, okay? This follows, the reason why I got this book actually, just to let you know, is because I'm trying to find like really cozy fall rom-com reads because I feel like there's a lot of great fall thrillers and mysteries, but not everybody's talking about rom-coms, so that's my mission, and I found this one on Kindle Unlimited. If you have any recommendations for really cheesy fall rom-com type reads, please leave them in the comments below. I would appreciate it. This one follows Brooks and Molly. They've been best friends since college. They actually run a business together. Brooks recently broke up with her boyfriend of very many years. I want to say they've been together like 7 or 8 years. And her sister is very mad at her because he is the best man in her wedding, in her sister's wedding, and she is the maid of honor. So now they're broken up and are going to cause her drama. So her sister tells her, you need to find somebody to take as a date to the wedding. So she decides she'll take her best friend, Brooks. This book was just great fall romance, okay? It was what I needed. It's set in Vermont in a cabin, which is actually like a mansion. What I loved about this book is it's a billionaire and a millionaire, okay? The girl is a billionaire and the dude is a millionaire. They run a very successful like biomedical company, but they're like, the author almost kind of pokes fun at wealth, but in a way that it's not like overdone. I also felt despite them being like a millionaire and billionaire, they were very in touch with reality without seeming unrealistic considering their wealth and background, if that makes sense. Also, there's a family in this book that is absolutely adorable. I picked up this particular book because of like the cover and the synopsis, but it's actually part of a series. So I plan to go back and read the other books because I think this was like the 4th in the series. I totally forgot that I had these books over here. So when we got to those points, we would be talking about it, but that's fine. Everything's fine. We're going to remember on the most important book in this video. The last book that we're going to talk about today is The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Remember before when I said that by the end of this video, we're going to be talking about how I've converted over to a fantasy reader? That would be because of this book. This book is one of the best books that I've ever read. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros is a fantasy book that follows a girl who is going to basically a war college for dragons. I don't know how else to explain it. As I mentioned, I'm not generally a fantasy reader. I am like unsophisticated, spicy romance, cheesy rom-com girl. Every once in a while a thriller, maybe a little mystery. Sometimes I'll read a historical fiction, but for the most part, pretty unsophisticated over here. This book had me hooked in within the first page, okay? It was so well written from the first word that's on the page all the way to the end. I cannot believe there are people out in the universe that have the talent that this writer had to pull this book off. It is worth the hype. I don't like overhyped books. If you've been following me for a while, I generally don't like hyped books because I feel like that sets me up to be a crappy reader because the expectation is so high that if I don't like it, then I'm like, what's wrong with me? You know what I mean? A million other people like it. The GoodReads on this book has almost 500,000 ratings and it's a 4.66. Okay, I cannot recommend it enough. There's not much I can even say without giving like any spoilers, so I'll just say go read it. Like, I cannot recommend this enough to anybody. After reading this book, I felt like I could have just signed up for the Olympics right then and there because of the amount of adrenaline that was coursing through my veins. I need everyone to read it so I can discuss it. I need there to be a recovery hotline for people who have read it. There's a second book that's coming out in November. So if your library has a long wait on this, that's probably a good thing because you can read this and then not have to wait as long as I will, because I'm going to have to wait about 2 months in order for me to figure out, because it does end on somewhat of a cliffhanger. It doesn't end in a completely unsatisfactory way though. So like, it's definitely a cliffhanger, but it's not like where you're frustrated and you want to throw it across the wall. You know what I mean? Like, hope that I've convinced you that you need to read that book. I think that's enough rambling about it. So last but not least, what we're going to get into is the books that I hope to read in the month of September. So these are the books that I want to read in the month of September. The first book that I want to read in the month of September is Best Frenemies by Max Monroe. I somehow managed to land myself on the list of people that get the advanced reader copy of this author's book. So I'm super pumped because I get to read that ahead of the September release date. And spoiler alert, I already read it because today is September 3rd, I want to say. I read it yesterday, absolutely loved it, so pre-order that book. Okay, I'll link that down below. Next up is another advanced reader copy. I think this one doesn't release until next year, but it's from the author B.A. Paris, who writes amazing thrillers, and this one's called The Guest, so I get to read this one ahead of the release as well. Super pumped about that. Another advanced reader copy that I get to read is called Plot Twist by Erin LaRosa, so I'm really excited about that. I want to read Neon Gods by Katie Robert. I had started this one on audiobook, but my library hold expired, so now I'm switching over to, I requested the library physical copy of the book, or not physical copy, but the library book copy, the ebook. I hope that makes sense. So I just got that, so I'm going to finish that up. I want to read Hester by Lori Lico Albanese. This was actually one of my book of the month picks from like a while back, so I want to read that. Lunar Love by Lori Kung Jessen is another one that I want to read. That was another book of the month pick that I haven't read yet. My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. That one obviously because it's fall time. And then A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Howley. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Elena Armas is one of the authors that I really love, and she's releasing a new book called The Long Game, so I'm excited to read that. Dear Heart, You Screwed Me by Ashley Rose. Somebody had recommended that in a Facebook group I'm on, so I'm intrigued to see how that is. There's another book called Out on a Limb. That one is by Hannah Bonham Young, and I'm excited to see that because my friend told me that it's really hilarious, so I'm excited to read that. One of the books that I got during that Stuff Your Kindle Day was called A Heiress and the Boy Next Door, and that one is by Renee S. Clark. Evie Drake Starts Over. I started that book, and I liked it, but I have the physical copy of the book, and my kids were not, like, they were about to rip out my pages, so I have to read that during their nap times or something. I gotta figure that out. That one is by Linda Holmes. I've read other books from her before, and I really liked it, so I'm excited about that one. Never Lie by Frida McFadden. This one was actually, I think, on the past 2 months of books that I was supposed to read. So I really need to read that because I heard it's really good. Pat Singleton, Rewrite Our Story. She has a new book coming out. I think it's called Tempt Our Fate, and it's the second book in this series. So I figure I want to read both of those. So I'm starting with this one. I don't know if I'll have time to read the second one in the month of September, but I at least want to get this one started. And then another book that my friend recommended was the Lakes Hockey series. The first one is called Before We Came by Sloane St. James. And I guess it's kind of like thriller meets romance. So we're going to see, I don't know if it's like dark romance or what it is considered, but we're going to see how I feel about that. So those are all the books that I want to read in the month of September. Are you guys excited? I'm excited. Do you have any book recommendations for me? I love a spicy romance. I love romance. I love romantic comedies. My favorite authors right now are like Sarah Adams, Megan Quinn. I love for historical fictions. I love Kristen Hanna, Kristen Harmel, and also Kelly Rimmer. Those are my favorites. So if you're looking for book recommendations, those are you probably can't go wrong with any of those authors. I also love Elizabeth O'Rourke. If you have Kindle Unlimited, look up Elizabeth O'Rourke, download the entire Devil series, and thank me in the comments, okay? But anyways, that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know this is a heavily talking video. You could probably listen to it like a podcast. Maybe eventually I will do a podcast, but I appreciate you listening to me talk about books. I'm very passionate about this. If you enjoy book content, please don't forget to check out my Instagram for books. I'll link both my regular Instagram and my Bookstagram down below. On my book account, I share graphics. So if you're into book content and you want to do challenges or share book reviews or any of that, I share those on that. And I have it saved as little highlights. So I'll probably put a picture up on the screen so you can know what I'm talking about. But anyways, I would love for you to come join my family over there. Okay, thank you again. I hope you have a magical day. Bye.